The Boys is perhaps one of the most popular comic book pieces of media right now. The show started off as a superhero parody of stuff like the DCEU and, MCU with a political spin on it. You have stand-ins for Superman, Wonder Woman, Spider-Man, and a whole bunch of iconic comic book characters. And oftentimes, the general consensus is that the original characters that are being parodied would beat their boys' counterparts. And yeah, that's pretty true for the most part. I don't think anyone needs me to explain why Superman would beat Homelander. But if there was one character from this show that I think actually has a chance against the character they're parodying, it would be Soulja Boy, the show's obvious stand-in for Captain America. He's a guy from out of his time who was experimented with Compound V, and he was used as a poster child of propaganda for the Americans during World War II. He has a pretty decent run, and due to factors out of his control, he finds himself in current day. That's just straight up Captain America's origin right there. The Boys is pretty realistic in showcasing the power of the supes in general, so I think that talking about someone like MCU Captain America versus Soulja Boy isn't a matchup that you look at and automatically roll your eyes at. I think there's actually a conversation to be had. And it seems that a lot of you guys agreed with me. I see this matchup all the time on TikTok, and hey, neither of these characters are particularly hard to scale, so let me analyze both characters' feats of strength, speed, and durability to see which one of these soldiers at a time is truly superior. But first, let me set some ground rules. Obviously, I'm not going to be talking about Captain America with the hammer. I think that's overkill. I don't think anyone needs me to tell you that Captain America with a weapon from Thor, the God of Thunder, would kill Soulja Boy very easily. So yeah, that's not really going to be something I talk about. I'm going to be using Season 3 Soulja Boy, and I'm going to be using current base Cap. So I don't want to hear any comic book feats for Captain America or Soulja Boy. I'm not talking about those iterations. So without wasting any more of you guys' time, let's get right into the breakdown. Alright, so let's start off with Captain America himself. Steve, as previously mentioned, was juiced up with the Super Soldier Serum, which granted Cap increased strength, durability, and stamina, enhancing his body to peak conditions and just being the peak human specimen in terms of MCU anyways. So I don't want to hear you guys say that he's Street Plus or like Mike Tyson level or anything like that, as Cap has some crazy stuff that no IRL peak man could ever hope to replicate. Steve utilized his abilities to help the Allies throughout the Second World War, completing many missions and defeating even more Nazis. But after a nap in the ice, Cap is thrown out into modern day, where he subsequently becomes an Avenger, dealing with threats too big for one hero, all in order to save the world. And during this era is where we will draw a huge chunk of his scaling. As a baseline, he has a feat where he was able to toss Ultron and very notably ram him through a chunk of concrete. Due to the portion of the pillar that was kind of eviscerated in this throw, we can calculate that Captain America can throw at forces equivalent to 0.01306 tons of TNT, which is around small building level. And keep in mind, this is for his casual tossing. Due to Captain America being considered a peak human specimen, he should upscale feats of durability performed by Peter Quill, where in this particular instance, he was able to endure an explosion in the building ranges of power. Cap should also scale the durability feats performed by Shuri, as she has a building plus level feat of durability right here. This Black Panther scaling is consistent, as Cap can fight on par with T'Challa during the events of Civil War, as he was able to engage with the King of Wakanda for a very prolonged period of time, with both combatants shown to endure each other's blows. Cap can also damage and fight on par with Loki, and while yes, he's shown to be noticeably weaker than the God of Mischief, he was still able to hurt him and fight him for a decent amount of time. This is very telling, as Loki can endure the destruction of the Bifrost point blank. Due to Loki's overall proximity to the explosion, and it's been determined that he can no-sell city block levels of destruction, and yeah, Cap kind of scales somewhat. You might think that the previously mentioned scaling chains are a bit odd, but I personally don't have that much issues with them due to Cap's showings against Iron Man during the events of Civil War, as the Prior was able to fight with Iron Man and overwhelm him, chipping away at his suit and even damaging him overall, with his AI companion even confirming at one point that Iron Man couldn't beat Cap hand-to-hand without analyzing his fight patterns. This is very telling because Iron Man's armor from a prior film was able to no-sell a portion of the destruction of Sokovia. The full blast is around mountain level if I recall, but Tony only scales to the portion that he endured, but that's fine because it's been determined that he was able to no-sell roughly 3 kilotons of TNT, which is small town level, a level of power that Cap, due to his showings in Civil War, would blatantly scale to. As for for his durability now, Cap can endure punches from Quicksilver that come out to around building level, and due to his showing from Avengers Endgame, we can determine that he can endure his own AP as he literally fought himself. And since we're talking about his durability, this is the perfect time to note that his shield can endure and reflect attacks that far outweigh his base AP or durability. But moving on to his speed now, Cap scales the Iron Man who can react while traveling at the speeds of his suits, which have calcs that put them in the massively hypersonic ranges with the same suit that he fights in Civil War, having a calculation that puts his travel speed at around Mach 260, which is a figure that's based on his showing of flying from the Raft to Siberia in the time that he does. But for higher ends, Cap would arguably find himself in the relativistic ranges, as Cap should scale to and has react to Iron Man's repulsors, which are confirmed to be beams of light. Seeing as how this matchup is likely going to be a hand-to-hand affair, I might as well talk about Cap's skill. Steve Rogers is confirmed to be proficient in numerous forms of martial arts. He's shown on screen to box in his free time, and he's also able to spar with Black Widow, who's consistently stated to be an expert in every fighting style, with even some scanners saying that she's the most skilled fighter in the world. Cap, due to his role during World War II, has literal experience in fields of war, and he can utilize his skill to fight with characters who are known to be stronger than him, such as Loki and Iron Man. And as previously mentioned, he can fight with characters just as skilled as him. Heck, he even caught Thanos lacking one time. So overall, I can confidently say that Captain America would find himself in the small buildings, even small town levels of attack potency. He would have speed ranging from around massive hypersonic to even relativistic plus. And G, with such battle prowess and base stats, it's no wonder that Cap lives up to his title as the first Avenger. Moving on to Soldier Boy now, and unlike Captain America, the hero of heroes himself is actually a high tier in the verse. So while for the MCU, we were kind of just scrabbling along feats of the mid-tiers and kind of generously gauging in attack potency range for Cap, we don't really have to do that for Soldier Boy because he's like the second strongest in the entire verse, so all the feats he just kind of upscales. Because as Homelander puts it, Soldier Boy was the only one who was nearly as strong as him. So let's start simple. Soldier Boy is much stronger than Black Noir, as Soldier Boy was shown to pretty easily beat him to a pulp on multiple occasions, with Black Noir suffering brain damage as well as PTSD from his last encounter with Soldier Boy. This is impressive as Black Noir is someone who can no-sell small building level explosions, as well as seemingly casually kill the super suit can generate them. And Soldier Boy made the Prior run in fear at the simple prospect of his return. For a closer gauge to his actual power though, he should upscale a teenage young adult Homelander's showcases of durability, as yes, in the canon episode of The Boys Diabolical that features Homelander, he's more than likely a teenager or a young adult. As revealed to us in this very season, Homelander was essentially a lab rat until the age of 16, if we're gonna go off the height measurement charts and when they just stopped listing him. We can assume that after he was done with all the labbing stuff, they kind of just pushed him out there, where we subsequently see him in the short. Keep in mind, the current Homelander who Soldier Boy scales to is over 40 years old, and seeing as how even during the time between season 1 and 2, Homelander is implied to have gotten so much stronger, it's safe to say that the showcases of durability shown in this short aren't really indicative of a current Homelander's capabilities. So they kind of just find themselves being a nice benchmark or, you know, bare minimum estimate for the high tiers in the verse, such as Soldier Boy. But anyways, during said short, Homelander was shown to no-sell a factory level explosion that comes out to around multi-city block level at the lowest, with higher end calculations asserting that the yield of the blast actually gets somewhat into the kilotons, or in simpler terms, generate enough energy relative to what would be required to destroy a small town. This range of durability is consistent for Soldier Boy, as he was able to endure his AoE attack point blank, and yeah, Soldier Boy is shown to be out of commission after using his blast, but I think it can be easily asserted that utilizing the attack seems to have incapacitated him rather than the attack actually hurting him, as we see that multiple times that after using this attack, Soldier Boy finds himself kind of woozy or even blacks out in some instances. There's also the fact that there isn't a scratch on Soldier Boy at all, and when calculated, it's been asserted that Soldier Boy can endure forces of around city block level, which is consistent. Soldier Boy should also upscale a character named Nubia who can casually create thunderstorms, and yes, this episode is confirmed to be canon to the mainline show, so yeah, storm generation typically requires talent to even large talent levels worth of energy, which Soldier Boy just kind of upscales. This range of power is consistent because when Billy Butcher, a character who spent the better part of a decade analyzing soups in order to kill them, so it's fair to say that his statements are indicative of their physical capabilities. When approached by the prospect that a weapon could have been the cause of Soulja Boy's death, he states that it must have been something like a hydrogen bomb. Keep in mind how he said an H-bomb in particular, because these bombs are actually stronger than regular atomic bombs. The typical hydrogen bomb nowadays kind of range from 100 kilotons to even 1 megaton, which is around large town to sea level at best. But seeing as how we're talking about an event from 1983, Butcher's statement about an H-bomb from that time period being needed to possibly kill Soulja Boy would mean that weapons like the SAR bomb could potentially be on the table, which would be a sentiment consistent with the modern day statements of Homelander being able to endure every weapon on Earth, and Soulja Boy is nearly as strong as Homelander and can even fight on par with him. Overall, granting Soulja Boy anywhere from multi-city block to even sea level ends at best, with large town being a pretty viable mid-ball in my opinion. As for speed now, he certainly scales to Homelander as they can fight on par with each other and such. This would grant him some easy hypersonic scaling, as Homelander has multiple feats in this range of speed, as Homelander has a feat where he was able to blitz an explosion and save Butcher before it could reach him, despite Billy being in extremely close proximity to the blast, which is a feat that gets calculated anywhere from Mach 10 to around Mach 18. But you can get him faster, as Homelander has alluded to the fact that he's been in space before, which would mean that he can reach terminal escape velocity, which is around Mach 33 or around hypersonic plus if I remember correctly. But for higher end scaling, such as Cap, Ben has consistently reacted to lasers or light-based attacks. These constructs are often referred to as lights or lasers in the show as well as in promotional material, with even the official Amazon audio commentary calling these constructs as such. A common rebuttal I've seen to this end of speed being consistent for these projectiles comes from A-Train's showing of blitzing these weapons mid-air. They like to point out that A-Train's max speed is around supersonic, and they kind of just use that in an attempt to downplay the speed of these constructs. But they fail to realize that A-Train during this scene right here was super amped by Compound V, and he had even developed an addiction to the substance. So A-Train was very likely the fastest he's ever been during this instance right here, and he even suffers a heart attack after the fact. So this isn't an example of A-Train's normal speed or even his regular amped speed, because he literally had a heart attack after the fact. Like, come on. So using this instance wouldn't be enough to assert that these projectiles aren't fired at the speed of light. So with all that out the way, Soulja Boy can react to them, move his shield to block them before they can reach him. So you can't appeal to him aim dodging either, as he would need relative speed to these constructs to block them after they were already fired. As for his skill now, Soulja Boy isn't nearly as skilled as Captain America. Like, he doesn't have any training with the world's greatest fighters or anything that I could find, but one can assert that he's quite skilled, as after all, he is a World War II veteran after all. And yeah, he was on the front lines as he said, he was still an active participant during the conflict. I think one could easily assert that he has some type of hand-to-hand training, as just by visually looking at him, he seems to know what he's doing. He's not like throwing his power around like Homelander, for example. But going back to Homelander, Soulja Boy was pretty consistently able to outskill him, and it was a pretty big reason as to why he lasted as long with Homelander as he did. So with the stats of both of these super soldiers out of the way, who would win? And to be honest with you guys, I got Soulja Boy winning more times than not, as he's just much stronger. If you remember Cap's ends, they were kind of like grasping at instances where he kind of contended with people who are pretty visually much stronger than him to kind of get him into the same range of power that Soulja Boy kind of just scales above, or just scales to. We got Cap to around City Block off of his showing of kind of denting Loki a little bit, right? While Soulja Boy is actually just enduring that force point blank. There's also the fact that in terms of viable high ends, Soulja Boy's stuff is a lot higher and more consistent. Like at best, Captain America should upscale Iron Man's durability showcase from Sokovia, which comes out to around small town. But you have random no-name soups in the verse having town to even large town level feats. And then you have Homelander saying that Soulja Boy is the only one that's nearly as strong as him, implying that these two guys right here are considerably above even like large town or town level feats. Whereas for Cap, that's just the best that he's got. Don't get me wrong, Captain America is certainly more skilled than Soulja Boy. That's, you know, pretty quantifiable actually, unironically, but it's not going to matter due to the sheer gap in strength. Both of them are relative in terms of speed, so I can't say that Cap is going to speed blitz or Soulja Boy is going to speed blitz for that matter. I don't really see any ways that Captain America with what he has on deck is going to win this fight. Like, you got Billy Butcher saying that he thinks that only a freaking H-bomb could take him out, and Cap's blows, as strong as he is, you know, he don't got none on H-bomb. So I don't see any real win cons that he has. Captain America has some weird outliers though that I want to implore people to stop using. Consistently, he's like a mid-tier in the verse, and I remember people were pointing out an instance from Endgame where Captain America was able to stagger Thanos a little bit, right? To kind of assert that Cap can, punch harder than like nuclear bombs or enough to kill Homelander or even Soldier Boy. I think pointing out this one instance is pretty disingenuous, as it's literally one instance. He has no other showcase against characters of this magnitude of power. And that's not even mentioning the fact that the blow didn't even hurt Thanos or anything like that. He immediately focused on Cap and kind of just ragdolled him from there. So I don't know if I'd say that's relativity right there. So overall, I think Soldier Boy is consistently just out of Cap's pay grade. He would need something like Thor's hammer in order to do it. And yeah, I didn't really talk about Soldier Boy's mini nuclear AoE attack, but it doesn't really mean anything, as it just takes too dang long to use, right? Nobody's gonna stand in place and wait for that to hit them. And there's also the fact that Captain America's shield could probably unironically block it. So it's not really viable or even worth mentioning, to be honest, especially when Soldier Boy could just beat him to death. But once again, I want to mention that I was talking about MCU Captain America, so I don't want to see any comic book, video game, animated feats in the comment section because I didn't cover that Cap. So overall, if the first Avenger and Soldier Boy ever got into a fight, I think it's safe to say that more times than not, the hero of heroes comes out on top, as today's winner is Soldier Boy. So yeah guys, that's about it. Was this matchup about what you expected, or do you disagree? If so, be sure to leave your reasoning down in the comments. I love to read everything down there, and if you want to start a conversation, that's the best way to do it. But while you're down there, drop the comment of the week as well, being payback. Dropping the comment doesn't only let me know that you're a real one for sticking to this point in the video, it also tells me that you liked it as well, and I'll make more videos like this. But as always, I'll see you guys next week, but until then, stay Big G fans.